Welcome, Mr. Blackwood. Good morning, Mr. Blackwood. The quarterly projections are on your desk. See that they are. The board is waiting. He didn't even look up. The man moves like a shark, all silent power and forward momentum.
Good.
Let them wait. Bring my Fofia.
Now.
The young analyst scurried away, his bravado evaporating under the sheer pressure of that cold gaze. Inside the boardroom, a palpable tension hung in the air. The executives from Sterling Corp shifted in their seats, their confident presentation from minutes ago now feeling like a child's drawing offered to a master artist. The door opened and Damian Blackwood entered. He didn't walk. He commanded the space, his tailored suit a suit of armor, his expression an impenetrable mask. He sat at the head of the table, the silence stretching into an uncomfortable eternity. He finally looked at the trembling executive opposite him. Your proposal is inefficient. It bleeds capital and is built on a foundation of wishful thinking. You value your company at $200 million. He let out a short, dismissive sound that was more terrifying than a shout. I value it at the cost of its liquidation. My offer is $50 million. Take it, or I will spend the next 6 months systematically dismantling your market share until you are begging me to buy your debt for pennies on the dollar. The choice is yours. The Sterling CEO was pale, sweat beading on his forehead. This was the legendary Damian Blackwood, a corporate titan who didn't negotiate. He dictated terms. The man was a ghost, a whisper in the highest echelons of finance, but his results were terrifyingly real. We accept. Damian simply nodded, already looking at his tablet, the victory so absolute it was boring. His second-in-command, Arthur, a man who had weathered Damian's storms for a decade, stepped forward as the defeated executives shuffled out. A clean kill, as always, sir. Damian didn't respond, his focus already on the next target. What about Innovatech? Arthur's expression tightened. They're proving resilient. A small software firm, but their new encryption algorithm is revolutionary. Their CEO is an idealist. Refuses to sell to a corporate entity like us. Thinks we'll corrupt his vision. Vision doesn't pay the bills. Damian's voice was clipped. They have a weakness. Find it. We've tried, sir. They run a tight ship. Their lead programmer is the heart of the operation, a woman named Alara Vance. But she's loyal. Loyalty has a price. Damian stood, his eyes scanning the city's skyline. I'm tired of long-distance warfare. I'll handle this one myself. Book me a modest apartment near their offices. And create a cover identity. A mid-level consultant. Name? Daniel. Just Daniel. Arthur blinked. Sir, you're going undercover? To find their weakness, you have to get close. I'll become part of the scenery until I find the perfect leverage. And when I do, I'll pull, and their entire world will unravel. A few days later, in a far less glamorous part of the city, Daniel wrestled with a cardboard box filled with minimalist, high-end kitchenware that looked utterly out of place in the shabby apartment building. He was dressed in jeans and a simple gray sweater, a deliberate costume of mediocrity. The persona felt foreign, ill-fitting. The hallway was narrow and smelled of old carpet and someone's overcooked cabbage. Suddenly, a small boy with wide, curious eyes and a shock of messy brown hair came barreling around the corner, colliding directly with his leg. An ice cream cone, a vibrant swirl of blue and pink, flew from the boy's hand and splattered across Daniel's expensive leather shoe.
Leo.
A woman's voice, frayed with stress, called out. Alara Vance rounded the corner, her face a mask of tired apology. She was wearing a faded band t-shirt and had a smudge of what looked like ink on her cheek. I am so sorry. He just gets away from me sometimes. Let me clean that for you. Daniel's first instinct was cold annoyance. He looked down at the sticky mess on his shoe, then at the boy, who was looking at his fallen treat with heartbreaking devastation. Before he could utter a clipped dismissal, the boy, Leo, looked up at him, his bottom lip trembling. My space monster ice cream, it's dead. An unexpected emotion flickered in Damian's chest. It was unfamiliar, a strange warmth that momentarily thawed his icy composure. He crouched down, meeting the boy's gaze. Space monsters are tough. I bet we can get you a new one. Leo's eyes lit up. Really? Alara rushed forward, flustered. Oh no, you don't have to do that. It was our fault. It's fine. His voice was softer than he intended. There's an ice cream shop on the corner. My treat. As a welcome gift from your new neighbor. He looked at Alara, truly looked at her for the first time. He saw the exhaustion in her eyes, but also a fierce, protective fire. He felt that same inexplicable pull he felt for the boy. I'm Daniel. Alara. And this is Leo. She offered a small, hesitant smile. It was the first genuine smile he'd seen in years that wasn't trying to sell him something. The next morning, Daniel walked into the offices of Innovatech. The space was a chaotic mix of brilliant innovation and financial desperation. Whiteboards were covered in complex code, but the chairs were frayed and the coffee machine looked ancient. He saw Alara at a desk in the corner, her brow furrowed in concentration as she typed furiously, a pair of oversized headphones on. Her manager, a pompous man named Greg, swaggered over to her desk. Vance, is the patch ready for deployment? The client is breathing down my neck. Alara pulled off her headphones. I'm still running diagnostics, Greg. If we rush this, the whole system could crash. I don't pay you to run diagnostics. I pay you to produce results. Have it on my desk in an hour. Greg strutted away, leaving Alara looking defeated. Daniel watched the exchange, a cold anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. He saw her value, her brilliance, being squandered by an incompetent fool. Later that day, the CEO of Innovatech, a well-meaning but overwhelmed man named Mr. Henderson, called an emergency meeting. His face was ashen. I have some difficult news. Marcus Thorne of Thorne Industries has made an aggressive, public takeover bid for Innovatech. The room erupted in panicked murmurs. Thorne was known for his brutal, slash-and-burn approach to acquisitions. He'd buy companies, strip them for their assets, and fire everyone. He's offering to cover our debts, Henderson continued, his voice heavy. But his terms are severe. He would gut our staff, our projects, everything we've built. Alara's face went pale. Her job, her passion, the very thing that kept a roof over her and Leo's heads, was on the line. She felt a wave of hopelessness wash over her. From the back of the room, Daniel watched her, his expression unreadable. His rival, Marcus Thorne, had just made a critical error. He hadn't just complicated Damien's plan. He had made it personal. Marcus Thorne arrived at Innovatech the next day like a conquering king. He was handsome, charismatic, and utterly ruthless, a predator in a bespoke suit. He swept through the office, his gaze dismissive, until it landed on Alara. He had been briefed. She was the company's most valuable asset. He bypassed Greg completely, walking directly to her desk. Alara Vance. I've read your file. Impressive. Thorne Industries could use a mind like yours. Greg sputtered, trying to interject. Mr. Thorne, I'm her manager. Marcus ignored him. He leaned in, his voice a low purr. I'm going to acquire this company. And when I do, most of these people will be redundant. But not you. You help me identify the core assets, streamline the transition, essentially help me dismantle this place, and I will make you very, very wealthy. Alara felt a chill run down her spine. This place isn't just an asset. It's a team. It's people's lives. I would never sell them out. Marcus's smile turned into a sneer. Loyalty is a luxury for those who can afford it. Think about my offer when you're struggling to pay your rent. Before he could continue, Daniel stepped forward, holding a tablet. Mr. Thorne, I'm Daniel, a consultant. I believe you're overlooking a critical flaw in your valuation. The algorithm's security protocols are intrinsically tied to the proprietary codebase developed by the in-house team. If you gut the staff, you lose the institutional knowledge required to maintain it. Within 6 months, the algorithm will be obsolete. It was a masterful bluff, woven from the technical details he'd absorbed overnight. Marcus was taken aback, unable to counter the specific argument. Alara stared at Daniel, stunned by a sudden, articulate defense.
Who are you?
Marcus snarled, his eyes narrowing on this unknown variable. Just a consultant. The company has a few more weeks before your hostile bid can be legally processed. I suggest you use that time to do your homework. Daniel's voice was calm, but held an undercurrent of steel that made Marcus pause. Thorne shot one last venomous glare at Alara before storming out, his entourage scrambling behind him. Greg, furious at being upstaged, immediately turned on Alara. What was that? You let this temp antagonize our only potential buyer? He was just trying to help, Alara stammered, her gaze still on Daniel, who had already returned to his desk as if nothing had happened. That night, Alara worked late, the stress of physical weight on her shoulders. The office was dark and silent, save for the hum of the servers and the clicking of her keyboard. Suddenly, the lights flickered and died, plunging the room into absolute blackness. She gasped, her heart pounding. It's just a power outage, she told herself, fumbling for her phone. The beam from her phone's flashlight cut through the darkness, but the sudden silence was unnerving. You okay? Daniel's voice came from the other side of the room, making her jump. I didn't know anyone else was here. He walked over, his own phone providing a second pool of light. Just finishing up some reports. It revealed the exhaustion on her face more clearly. You work too hard. It's the only way, she said with a sigh, sitting back in her chair. I have to. For my son. In the shared darkness, the pretense of the office fell away. They talked for over an hour, waiting for the power to return. She told him about her dreams of being a programmer, about the sacrifices she'd made, about her fears for Leo's future. He listened, truly listened, with an intensity that made her feel seen in a way she hadn't in a long time. He spoke little about himself, offering vague details about a past life in corporate consulting, but his presence was a comforting, solid anchor in the storm of her anxiety. For the first time, Damien understood the human cost of his corporate battles. This wasn't just a game of numbers. It was about people like Alara fighting with everything they had. The power flickered back on as abruptly as it had gone out. The harsh fluorescent light broke the spell. Alara blinked, feeling a little self-conscious. I should get back to it. Daniel simply nodded. Get some rest, Alara. You've earned it. The next day, Marcus Thorne retaliated. News came down that Innovateca's primary line of credit had been frozen. Thorne had leveraged his influence with the bank, a classic corporate strong-arm tactic. Panic ripped through the company. Without that credit, they couldn't make payroll. Mr. Henderson gathered everyone, his face a mask of despair.
I'm sorry.
Paychecks will be delayed. Indefinitely. The words hit Alara like a physical blow. Delayed indefinitely meant no rent money. No groceries. Eviction. Greg immediately pointed a trembling finger at her. This is your fault. You and your consultant friend. You angered him. The weight of her colleagues' fearful stares was crushing. She fled to the deserted break room, tears finally streaming down her face. A moment later, Daniel walked in, closing the door behind him. This isn't your fault, he said, his voice firm. He was right. I can't afford to be loyal. I can't afford anything. She sobbed, her defenses crumbling. Damien's hands clenched into fists at his sides. He had seen empires fall with less emotion than he felt watching this one woman cry.
Enough. This ends now.
He pulled out his phone, his fingers flying across the screen as he sent a series of encrypted messages. The final all-hands meeting felt like a funeral. Mr. Henderson stood before his team, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He held a pen over a stack of documents, the surrender to Thorne Industries. We fought a good fight, but we have no other options. I have to accept Mr. Thorne's offer. A collective sigh of despair filled the room. Alara closed her eyes, bracing for the impact. Just as Henderson's pen was about to touch the paper, his assistant burst into the room, her face flushed with disbelief.
Sir.
You need to see this. An email. She handed him her phone. Henderson read it, his eyes widening. He read it again, his mouth falling open. What is it? Greg demanded impatiently. Our debt. Henderson's voice was a whisper of awe. It's been purchased. In full. By an anonymous benefactor. Not only that, they've injected $50 million of operating capital into our accounts. Effective immediately. The room was silent for a beat, then erupted into a cacophony of stunned, joyous shouts. People were hugging, crying with relief. Marcus Thorne, who had been waiting in Henderson's office to gloat, stormed into the room, his face purple with rage. What is the meaning of this? Who did this? No one knew. It was a ghost, a miracle. Amidst the chaos, Ilara's eyes scanned the room and found Daniel. He was standing calmly in the corner, leaning against the wall, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk on his lips as he slid his phone back into his pocket. He caught her gaze and gave her a small, reassuring nod. And in that moment, a seed of suspicion, wild and impossible, took root in her mind. The celebration at Innovatech was euphoric. Champagne someone had been saving for a product launch was popped, and the relief was so thick you could taste it. The first order of business for the revitalized company was Henderson, with newfound confidence, firing Greg on the spot for his cowardice and incompetence. His second act was promoting Ilara to Director of Project Development, giving her full creative control over the algorithm she had poured her life into. She was stunned, overwhelmed, and for the first time in years, hopeful. The anonymous benefactor was the talk of the office, a mythical hero who had swooped in to save them. Theories flew around: a philanthropic billionaire, a rival of Thorne's with a conscience, even a foreign investor. Ilara played along, but her mind kept returning to Daniel, to that calm, knowing look in the midst of chaos. It was impossible, of course. He was just a consultant. But the feeling lingered, a question she couldn't shake. That evening, in the concrete parking garage beneath the office building, Marcus Thorne cornered Daniel as he was walking to his nondescript sedan. The raw fury on Thorne's face was startling. I don't know who you are, but you were involved. That was not a random act of charity. That was a targeted strike. Who are you working for? Daniel, who had been Damian Blackwood for the last hour on a series of ruthless phone calls, let the mask drop for a fraction of a second. The air around him seemed to grow colder, heavier. His gaze, no longer that of a mild-mannered consultant, was sharp enough to cut glass. Let's just say you picked a fight with the wrong person. He didn't raise his voice, but the sheer, undisguised authority in it made Marcus take an involuntary step back. A sleek, black Maybach, a car that cost more than the entire Innovatech office, purred silently up the ramp and stopped beside them. A chauffeur in a crisp uniform stepped out and opened the rear door. Damian didn't even glance at Marcus again. He simply got in the car. As the tinted window slid up, he spoke one last time, his voice a low threat that promised financial annihilation. You targeted my assets. I will now dismantle yours. Piece by piece. The Maybach pulled away, leaving Marcus Thorne standing alone, trembling with a mixture of rage and a dawning, terrifying realization. He didn't know the man's name, but he knew he had just threatened a king. Ilara came home that night to find the lights in her small apartment were dim, the television off. Leo was on the floor, not with his usual action figures, but with a complex-looking chess set. And sitting across from him, patiently explaining a move, was Daniel. He looked up as she entered, and the warm, gentle smile he gave her was so at odds with the impossible suspicion in her mind that it made her head spin. Leo jumped up and ran to her, his face beaming.
Mom.
Daniel is teaching me chess. He says I'm a natural strategist. You're a natural at getting people to do what you want, she said, hugging him tightly. She looked over at Daniel. Thank you. For today. I mean, for defending me with Mr. Thorne. It meant a lot. He just nodded, his expression giving nothing away. You deserve to be defended. Leo, who was setting up the board again, piped up without looking at them. Daniel is like a superhero, Mom. He just shows up and fixes everything. He doesn't even make a big deal about it. He just does it. Ilara's breath caught in her throat. She looked from her son's innocent, happy face to the man sitting on her living room floor. The consultant who spoke with the authority of a CEO. The man in the modest apartment who somehow didn't flinch at the idea of a $50 million miracle. The contradictions were suddenly too great to ignore. The pieces clicked into place, forming a picture that was both terrifying and exhilarating. She walked over and sat on the couch, her gaze fixed on him.
Who are you?
She asked, her voice barely a whisper, but it cut through the quiet room with the force of a shout. Daniel, no. Damien looked up at her. The gentle, unassuming mask of the consultant finally dissolved, and for the first time, she saw the man underneath. The power, the intensity, the cold authority she'd seen him use against Thorne was now in his eyes, softened only by a flicker of something else, something vulnerable and uncertain that was directed only at her. He opened his mouth to answer, to finally tell her the truth, and in that charged, silent moment, the world seemed to hold its breath.